Hi, I'm Glenn Tinley with Winnipeg Men and Women Magazine and Marketplace Magazine, and I am here with our Premier Greg Selinger for our quarterly, regular quarterly update. Thank you again for having us in.
Thanks, Glenn.
For having me in.
Yeah, no problem.
Running solo today.
Yeah.
Couple of things. Let's start with, now it's been a little bit now, but there was a speech from the throne a little while ago, and just worldwide economy is obviously changing a lot of things.
Fragile. Yeah.
Provincially, where do you see that? What adaptations are you having to make, and what are you looking at?
Well, there is no question there's global fragility in the economy.
Yeah.
And it is changing some of the forecasts about growth. But we actually think the best way to deal with that is to have a strong program to grow your own economy, including Manitoba Hydro, including working with our manufacturers, including having a low rate of unemployment that gives consumers confidence, and all of those things suggest that when things get tough, we don't go down as much as everybody else. And so we have a more diversified economy, which allows a greater steadiness. There will be some impacts in Manitoba, like everywhere else, but I noted as even last month, we're still increasing the number of people working in Manitoba. Employment's still going up. And even today, for example, inflation has gone down. So, you know, things are still looking pretty positive here, and we've got a lot of good projects in the pipeline. So the way you handle the economy is to have a good plan to grow it, and the more you can grow the economy, the more you have resources for things like healthcare and education.
How does, and obviously this is more maybe a question for Hydro, but obviously you're very close to these things, but contracts and, you know, with the US economy and them looking for green energy, Hydro's obviously a natural fit for them. And I know there's been announcements in the past. Are you seeing, maybe because of municipal governments in the States maybe having issues, or federally, that those are slowing down, or are those maintaining?
No, we have some very good contracts with Minnesota and Wisconsin for firm power sales, because they need baseline power of at least $7 billion, and the potential for further contracts. The big impact on energy prices in the States is in the spot or the short-term market. Okay. Because the economy's soft right now, and there's a lot of what they call shale gas being developed, which is a new technology that gets access to gas in a way that they call fracking. They send this technology through the ground, which actually releases gas from geological formations which were, up to now, very hard to reach. Okay. Now, that's controversial from an environmental point of view. It's not entirely clear what the future supply of that will be. But so in the short term, there has been some price depression because of the excess amount of natural gas out there and the weakness in the economy. But we're not building hydro for the next 5 or 10 years. We're building hydro for 70 to 100 years. And the contracts push out at least another decade. So the reality is that some of the advantages for building hydro right now is that the cost of capital is relatively cheap. So financing is cheap. And when you actually build a new dam, it's almost at a fixed price. There's very little inflation risk once you put the assets in place. Really the biggest inflation risk is the cost of wages to provide the people that look after it. So all of the dams that have been built in the past have proven to be profitable over time. And the great news is that they're very stable assets that stay in place for decades.
Well, and it's, I mean, these are massive building projects.
Yes. For example, the next one is about $6.5 billion kiosk. So it's a major project, but it takes several years to get the environmental approvals, and then the build, and you've got to put infrastructure in place, roads, you've got to train people. All of these things are being done as we speak. We're gearing up for it. And then you have to get your final approvals. By the time you get it built, 8, 9, 10 years from now, presumably the economy is going to turn around, and there's going to be more opportunity, and we're going to be on. We're going to be through the worst of this global economic fragility that we're experiencing.
Is there still a plan for like an east-west line?
There's lots of talk about it. There's not as much of a plan for it. I just want to say one final thing. The contracts we've signed are firm contracts, so those prices are locked in. So that helps. Basically, you're prepaying the cost of your own dams in Manitoba by your export customers paying for it, the power, before you actually need it as a domestic economy. And to the east and west of us, Saskatchewan and Ontario, they pay much more for electricity than we do. So that relates to your next question, this idea of an east-west grid. We actually think it makes sense, and we're in discussions with Saskatchewan about that, to upgrade our connections to each other. Most connections for moving power go north and south.
Right.
The more we can have east and west, the more we can supply our neighbors with power when they're already paying far more than are paid in Manitoba.
Yeah.
So that can allow us to, again, have some profitable markets.
Well, and it would just, it also, you know, I would think, I'm going to say hedge. You just, I mean, the U.S. has been a great neighbor, but ultimately, they're in a bad spot right now.
Yeah, having a diversity of customers is a good thing.
Yeah.
And in Canada, the federal government has decided that coal plants, after their useful life is completed, should be phased out unless they have proper environmental technology on them.
Right.
So that creates another opportunity for electricity from hydro to be sold to our neighbors as they phase out their coal plants.
Yeah.
And those kinds of pressures will also be in the American economy as well, to phase out some of the more older coal plants and some of the older technologies. So we remain very optimistic about the potential for us to continue to build Manitoba Hydro and to be a supplier of choice in many jurisdictions around us.
Yeah, well, I know just in the U.S., and I can't remember the exact stat, but I think people will be surprised how much energy they derive from coal.
Huge, about 50%.
Yeah, it's 50%. Massive, and as that has a life.
It does.
Once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of energy derived from coal in the United States, and there's a major coal lobby which will protect against things, push hard to avoid things like carbon taxes, etc.
Right.
But it's also true that carbon sequestration technology is extremely expensive and not entirely proven yet either.
Right.
So there will always be a search for alternative, cleaner sources of energy.
Yeah.
And even the XL pipeline, which we've heard a lot about in the news these days, which is natural gas and hydrocarbons coming from Canada. There's even controversy about where the pipeline should go.
Yeah.
But, you know, the argument that Canada has made, and Alberta in particular, is that's a source of energy from a reliable partner of yours, your northern neighbor. It's your closest source to have imports of clean energy.
Yeah.
Manitoba Hydro is in an even better position. We don't have to worry about pipelines.
Yeah.
All we have to do is ensure that we can get transmission lines built.
Right. And have there been, I mean, it's just, you don't hear of the controversy with transmission.
There always is some issues about that, but far less than there is on pipelines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, related to hydro, but I know hydro is also involved with some wind projects.
Yes.
And those are actually ramping up quite well.
Yeah, we just completed the St. Joseph's wind farm this spring. It's gone live. It's about 137 megawatts.
Yeah.
It was about a $345 million project built in the middle of the recession. It employed over a couple hundred people at its peak. Mm-hmm. So very successful. There's just been an expansion of a smaller project, but another 15 megawatts to be added to the 100 megawatt project in St. Leon, Manitoba, in southwestern Manitoba.
Right.
So Manitoba is now getting in the order of over 250 megawatts of wind power. We get the best prices on it, because we negotiate to get a very good price on it. And because, again, the American economy is soft, there's some very good prices to be achieved on turbines and blades, etc.
And well, the dollar.
Yeah, the dollar allows us to purchase those things, the companies to bring them up here more cost effectively. So there is the potential for some more wind power as well.
Yeah, okay. Let's shift gears a little bit to something that we briefly talked about in the past, and I know is controversial at a level for sure, is the Canadian Wheat Board and the federal government sort of pushing through with the dismantling of it. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question is, I mean, obviously it's going through. To date, have you seen the negative impact that you thought?
Well, it's still early because the Wheat Board stays in place in its present form as a single desk until next August.
Right.
So, but we are preparing. First of all, we've made it clear we have major concerns about dismantling it as rapidly as they're doing, because in Winnipeg here, there's a big impact on jobs. A lot of jobs can be lost. 400 direct jobs, up to a couple hundred thousand jobs indirectly. Secondly, what's the impact on smaller and medium-sized farmers, particularly farmers that are not as close to the American marketplace, where they have greater challenges in transporting their product.
Sure.
And thirdly, major concern about the future of Churchill, Manitoba, where over 95% of what they ship through Churchill is product from the Wheat Board. Yeah. So there's a lot of work going on. Community leaders are coming together. They're looking at how to respond to this legislation to make sure Manitoba comes out ahead. And there will be a delegation going to Ottawa, and I believe we'll come up with some very constructive suggestions on how to ensure that if this bill passes Parliament, it has not stopped through the lawsuits that are going on right now,
Yeah.
that we'll be able to position Manitoba to come out of this as a stronger economy with support for farmers that need it, opportunities for people that are working in Winnipeg, and a dynamic role for Churchill as being the only inland deep sea terminal in the middle of North America, right at the top of Manitoba at Churchill.
So are you thinking slower dismantling? Because I mean, obviously with the majority government that they've got, they're not necessarily going to...
It's not clear. I mean, they would like to do it quickly after August of 2012, but we'll see. I mean, the point is we have to be proactive in responding to that concern and making sure Manitobans are well prepared to express the concerns about it and to help us adapt, if necessary, to the new reality.
Well, and this brings me to the sort of the center port idea with, I mean, it's happening, obviously it's happening, but there's lots of building going on there, and we've actually done a big feature on it in the upcoming issue of Marketplace, of what's happening out there and things. So, and they're really looking at Churchill Port as a northern...
Yeah, Churchill's a huge asset for Centerport. Centerport, as our listeners might know, or viewers, is a major multimodal industrial park right here in Winnipeg, 20,000 acres, that has access to rail, 3 of the major rail lines in North America, Burlington Northern, CNCP, major trucking companies in Winnipeg, of which we have 5 of the largest in North America, and a 24/7 airport, which is brand new.
Which is beautiful, by the way.
Yeah. And so we have a phenomenal opportunity to have a foreign trade zone right in the middle of Centerport that producers and manufacturers and shippers can use as an opportunity to both access the broader North American market as well as move out of North America into Asia, Europe, and other places around the world over the top through Churchill. And that's where the Churchill opportunity is so important, because it's actually a faster way to get to some of these foreign markets and a cheaper way to get there. So,
well, and with shipping and fuel, and I mean, that I think you're going to see international companies hopefully using that.
We're looking, and there's lots of work going on to attract interest. There's been a tremendous amount of interest shown. It's one of those things where we have to invest in some infrastructure first, but there's a good board in place. They've forged some good relationships in China already, as well as down in the United States and in Europe as well. So as the concept develops, it could help Manitoba reinvent itself, not just as the gateway to the West, but the gateway to the planet.
Yeah, well, the North, and I remember we actually ran this speech that Dr. Art Morrow gave as the Golden Boy points north, which is, there's so much opportunity in the North.
Absolutely.
That, you know, Churchill, so even though right now wheat board is such a major component to Churchill Port, there's other opportunities that are sort of evolving.
And there still might wind up being a wheat board in a multi or a dual market situation, a wheat board that serves producers that don't feel they will be well served by other alternatives. And it could still have a major role in providing grain shipments through Churchill as we go ahead over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, so I mean, because I know the rail line and the port themselves is a private entity.
It is. So it's owned by a company out of Denver, Colorado, called Omnitrax, and we're in regular discussion with them, and they've made some investments. We'd like them to make more. Government, provincial and federal, have put some investments into upgrading the rail line, but there is still more investment needed in the port, and including upgrading the rail line as well. But you know, the opportunity's there if people have the foresight and the willingness to invest some patient capital to see things happen.
Yeah, well, it's not going to happen overnight, that's for sure.
No, but I think good things will happen for Churchill. But we do want to keep its role as a transportation access to North America and egress to the rest of the world as one of the central features of Churchill and the northern economy.
Okay. Let's talk about sports for a second.
Sure.
Today's Friday, the Bomber game is on Sunday. Are you going to be at the game?
I don't think I will be, but I'll certainly be cheering and watching the game, and it's going to be that win will take us to the Grey Cup right after that.
Yeah.
So the team's played well this year.
Very well.
And this is the last game in the old stadium.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it'll be a full house. It's going to be an exciting game. And it's going to be very interesting playing Hamilton because, as you know, the Hamilton quarterback used to be our quarterback.
Yeah, and their offensive coordinator is Kahari Jones, who also used to be. So there's some natural rivalry.
Kahari Jones has a relationship with a lot of the veterans in Manitoba here, and he co-invests with someone in this Booster Juice company, etc.
Yes, yeah.
So there'll be a lot of rivalry. There's a historic rivalry between Hamilton Tiger Cats and Winnipeg Blue Bombers going back to the Kenny Plain days and Glenn Grant days and Bernie Filoni days. So it'll be a lot of fun, and I actually think we'll do quite well. We could very well be in the Grey Cup very soon.
Would you get to head out there to?
I usually go anyway because I meet with some of the premiers out there and get some other things done, but it would be fantastic to go with the Bombers.
Oh yeah,
having them in the game would just make the year.
And what about Jets? Have you been able to get?
I have been to a few games, and actually just this week, Mark Chipman and myself announced a license plate, a Jets license plate.
I saw that, yes.
And we worked it out so that $30 off every license plate sale will go into the Winnipeg Jets True North Foundation.
Right.
And that foundation will be making major investments in youth programs, hockey, drop-in centers, school programs. All of these things will be very much a part of NHL being in Winnipeg. And we're helping support that with the license plate program, as well as some partnerships on after-school programs for kids. So I'm fantastically excited about the Jets. It's making a gigantic difference to how we feel about ourselves. It's making a gigantic difference to the downtown with 45 games, including exhibition games, bringing 15,000 people at a time downtown. And people are enjoying it. And there's going to be some good benefits for the community as well.
Well, and I can tell you, and we talked about this beforehand, but we were just down in New York at a trade show. And no word of a lie, almost to a T, everybody we spoke to brought up the fact that, wow, you got your hockey team back. And it really, I mean, here we are in New York City, we're talking to people from Alabama, Georgia, I mean, Georgia, Atlanta, they knew, but Alabama and the South of Virginia, and they're talking hockey and Jets, where a year ago, that wouldn't have been a conversation. It really puts us onto the map. When you're trying to do business, and people say, oh, I know Winnipeg, because that's the Jets. It really does make a difference.
It really does, and that was one of the first experiences I had when I came into government. I was in Japan, and I was meeting with some bankers over there.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, sorry about the Jets then. And I said, what do you know about hockey? Oh, we all like hockey in northern Japan. So, you know, it's a worldwide brand that puts Manitoba and Winnipeg on the map. It's good for business because it gives us an introduction to people all over the world.
Yeah.
On the culture side, the ballet and the symphony somewhat play the same roles.
For sure.
So we have some world-class assets in this town,
yeah,
which is making Winnipeg and Manitoba an exciting place to be. And we're going to have some more when we complete the Human Rights Museum.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to have the best stadium in the country when we get the new Bomber Stadium built next year.
And I just said we've got a great airport for people to,
the airport,
to land in.
It's a beautiful asset with a very high-level architectural design that's won awards already. So Winnipeg is becoming a place that's got a sense of excitement about it, and Manitoba has a sense of excitement about it. That's good for young people, it's good for business, it's good for our self-image and how we feel about ourselves.
If we can just somehow get that U.S. economy to start struggling a little more, and that would lock things in.
Absolutely.
Well, anyway, I won't take up any more of your time. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you so much for having us, and we will see you in the new year at some point.
All right.
I am Glenn Tinley with Winnipeg Men and Women Magazine and Marketplace Magazine, and we'll see you in 2012.